Greetings! In this video I'll be painting an Intercessor of the Marine's Malevolent chapter. This was a requested chapter by these fine folks. I've 3D printed some Mark III pauldrons, including this one that I put their insignia on myself. The helmet is in the style of the Hellblaster's kit, and I've given him a power fist, a plasma pistol, and a melter charge. I primed the model grey this time, as it should help with the yellow base coat. I decided to start with Imperial Fist contrast paint. I've hardly used yellow in the past, merely to detail certain elements or for heraldry, never for armour like this, so you'll be seeing how I do for my first try. I applied the contrast paint in fairly large sections, trying to keep the paint moving and fill as much area as possible before it dries. If it starts to dry and you go over it again, you can cause the edges of the partially dry paint to tear, which is not ideal. That being said, I've rarely used contrast paint in its intended way, so you have to forgive any errors I make with its application. I did get more confident applying the contrast paint after a while. It seems that this colour is a lot more forgiving than the others I've used before. Maybe because it's such a light colour? I was happy with the final result of the Imperial Fist base coat, but after inspecting it a bit I noticed a lot of unfavourable spots and streaks. I switched to Black Templar for the torso, power pack, undersuit, and weapon details. I would usually use Black Legion for this, but Black Templar is a bit thinner, so it might help automatically highlight a bit, and I also like the faint blue tint it has. I tried to avoid hitting the yellow armour, but I did make a few little mistakes. Those spots were later painted over in the yellow layering phase, or integrated into weathering. I switched to a smaller brush for some of the details, especially the armorial. I subconsciously kept bringing it closer to my face as I painted it. The camera work suffered. Moving on to Leadbelcher, painted in the metallic parts, the Imperialis, weapons, power pack, and other small details around the miniature. It looked like the primer filled in the details on this skull. I have no idea how people apply lighter colour airbrush primers without this happening. 5 coats for coverage and this happens. I switched to Rhinox hide to block in the leather details. It took 2 coats to cover the grey primer. I then switched to Skrag brown to paint in the spots I wanted to appear worn, the edges of course, and some spots along the smoother surfaces to help break it up. I tried to make some kind of sagging pattern here. I'm not sure it worked out too well though. For the final touches, Deathclaw brown was used. This mainly went in the middle of the larger spots of Skrag brown, and on some of the edges I wanted to emphasise. At this point I decided to paint the eyes. I used Evil Sunz Scarlet to paint in the lenses. I followed that up with Wild Rider red, going from the middle of the lens towards the front, finally putting in a little dot with Lugganath orange. Now back to the yellow, I decided to almost fully layer the Imperial Fist with Yriel yellow. I thinned the paint with a bit of water so it went on smoother. I applied this paint to pretty much every surface that was previously hit with Imperial Fist. After seeing what it looked like when it had dried on the first few parts I hit, I was a lot more confident with this decision. It was effectively smoothing out the colour, reducing the streaky appearance that was there before. highlighting I used Phalanx yellow. I used this along many of the edges, and tried to blend it in on some of the larger up-facing surfaces. I then moved to Dorn yellow and did the final highlight and some chipping effects. This might look a bit bright, but it'll be toned down by the weathering pass. As I do the edges, I raise the brush in a shaky motion, so it's not a continuous line. This allows for a fast chipping effect. Just don't stick to the same pattern. Keep the brush raised or lowered for random times so it doesn't look too intentional. I went back to Black Templar to clean up the black. Next I decided to give the black armour the same treatment as the yellow armour. I decided to lean into the slightly blue tint of the Black Templar and use Dark Reaper for the first highlight. This was used along all the edges, and also as a layer on some of the more pronounced surfaces, like the chest, the top of the power pack, the plasma pistol, and the culet. I find highlighting black difficult. Corvus black and the dark greys are hard to make out, but if you go straight to Mechanicus standard grey, it can end up looking too grey. Dark Reaper keeps it from looking grey, but as you'll see later, it makes it look more blue instead. I was hoping it wouldn't, but I did resolve that later. The final highlight I used was Thunderhawk blue. I applied this in a similar way to the Dorn yellow, while also trying to bring the brightness up enough to apply chipping later. As you can see now, the armour looks blue, not black. I'll fix that later. For now though, I prepared the right pauldron for transfers with a gloss varnish. Cut out the battle line tactical marking in a high Gothic numeral. Only now when editing did I notice I forgot to paint the coloured stripe on the helmet. The Marines Malevolent denote company with a helmet stripe. I guess this guy's second company now then. I covered the pauldron with microset, then applied the markings. The combination of the gloss varnish and the microset helped to prevent the visible edge that can be left by transfers. After the microset was dry, I applied microsol, which helps the decal conform to the rounded surface and remove any wrinkles. If you're applying decals to an entire squad, the first model should be ready for the next coat by the time you finish the last one. Alternatively, you could use a cotton tip to dry each step like I do here. Just be careful not to tear the decal by dragging. I switched back to Leadbelcher to clean up some of the mistakes I made. I also painted in the plasma pistol muzzle housing. I then layered that up with Sycorax bronze. Now for a dark grey acrylic wash. I thinned it with some water and applied it all over the metallics and the black armour. This shaded the metal nicely, while also bringing down the blue tone of the power armour to a more bearable level. Now for the plasma effect. I began by painting techless blue in the coils, making sure to get a complete coat. I followed that with a white acrylic wash. While box art shows the coils being lighter, artwork in video games often show the coils being in the darker spot, which makes sense as they're meant to be there for cooling. Now for the weathering. I used AK's Aircraft Engine Wash, thinned with a bit of AK's Odorless Thinners, and applied it all over the model, though I avoided the plasma glow effect. Here I thinned out what was on my brush and tried to remove the ghosting around the insignia. After I was happy with the enamel, I let it dry for about half an hour. I then switched to Rhinox Hard to paint in some chips. The Marines Malevolent are known for their brutality, and I figure their armour receives a fair bit of battle damage during a campaign. I find weathering models relaxing now. There's something about going slow and adding little tiny effects. I tend to go a bit overboard though. For the black armour, I decided to try Stormvermin fur for the chipping effects. Rhinox Hard is a bit dark to be nursed on the black, so a more grey-brown might look better. I didn't do too much, but it came out alright. Wanting to bring the silver back up a bit, I switched to Ironbreaker and did a light pass. And now for the details on the wrist. I used Evil Sunz Scarlet for the wire and the button light things. I then switched to Wild Rider Red to highlight the lights. And finally a dot of Lugganath Orange on each light. After that I went to base and varnished the model. You can check out my video on the Storm Speeder if you want to see how I do that. And here we have it, an Intercessor of the Marines Malevolent 2nd Company. Considering the trepidations I had about painting yellow, the final result is pretty good. I think I'll stick with the black primer going forward however. It applies faster and easier. If I'm going to do a bright colour like this, I'll just do a Celestra Grey undercoat with a large brush. I took a day to think about the model after I applied the Imperial Fist contrast paint. The finish it had at the time left me demoralised. Layering it up with Yriel yellow definitely fixed the concerns I had though. I'm annoyed that I forgot to paint the stripe on the helmet. I intended to go 3rd or 4th company for this guy, a red or green stripe, but I think the issues I had with the yellow and trying to get the black look right made me lose track. The only other criticisms I have would be the face and the plasma gun. I think I highlighted the face too much, especially compared to the forehead. The shading in the little vents didn't work out this time for some reason as well. As for the plasma gun, the coil effect looks wrong somehow. I explained this is how it's meant to be, but I don't think I've gotten the technique right yet. Overall though, I'm happy with this one. I really like the weathering, and the shade of both the yellow and black is pleasing to me. I hope you found some enjoyment from this video, and if you have any suggestions about what chapters you'd like to see in the future, let me know in the comments. I have the next 3 built and primed, though I might do something different in between, who knows. Anyway, I hope you'll stick around for the next one.